Well, let's now see how investors have traded in the week that was. To do so, we're joined by Gemma Dale from nabtrade. Gemma, great to have you on the program as always. All right, give us the number one stock of the week.
Look, I always want to say something a little bit different and interesting, but it's back to Fortescue again, which is not going to surprise anyone, right? Clearly, what's been happening with the share price this week is going to attract the attention of our guys. We had our charity trading day on Tuesday, which is when we want our biggest volumes of the year. And we want people to get excited and trade because we give 100% of brokerage to charity. And thankfully, Fortescue was up massively on the day. It was up about 8% during the day and during trade. And that gave a lot of our higher value investors a reason to sell. So they were trimming on that price. It's been fairly mixed through the week, but there's been something to move on. They're not sitting on that stock at the moment. They're moving it in really big volumes. BHP's following it. So that is also quite mixed. It's quite interesting to observe with BHP. A lot of our smaller investors have been picking it up for yield, which is quite extraordinary for anyone who's been around for a long time, picking up one of your big miners for yield. But they're seeing it as fairly attractive. And at this price, they haven't had a chance to pick it up at this price for a while, so they're enjoying that too.
Gemma, EML yesterday, it was a huge move. I think it finished up over 30% on the day. Were there investors that got involved in that move?
Yeah, that one's super interesting. Obviously, they were under a massive amount of pressure. The Central Bank of Ireland had made some comments about, not just made comments, but certainly raised some concerns about some of the work that was going on over there. Gave them a green light for new customers and for new programs, which was very attractive. Share price bounces dramatically. We saw selling across the board. So we've obviously had investors who've been picking it up on weakness, and they saw that as an opportunity to get out because it's certainly not at its 52-week high. It's still well off that. And so for a lot of our investors, if they're trimming at this price, they're either not thinking there's a lot of further upside or they bought it at the lows and they're just going to take their profits while they can. We're also seeing a couple of other price targets clearly getting hit for people. I mentioned recently that Telstra, $4 is the magic number for Telstra. It's quite fascinating how many people want to trim at that level. So we're seeing it quite strongly in our numbers, quite aggressive selling, frankly. But it's sort of trimming people who've held it for a long time and who really have felt like they needed an opportunity to reduce their position there. And CSL also similar, a lot of, above $315, a lot of our guys are going, that's an amazing price. I'm really happy to get out at that level because they were buying at the sort of 240, 250, 260 level earlier in the year. They got two bites at that cherry because they got one during the COVID lows. And then again this year, a lot of people didn't expect CSL to sort of plumb those steps again. And again, well above $200 where it was 4 years ago. So they've done well out of it and they're happy to trim it at this price.
Gemma, we love a round number target. What about the financials? Have we seen much action this week?
Yeah, they're continuing to attract attention. It's worth noting volumes are right down at the moment, with the exception of charity trading day. As I said, when we want to see that spike, there's not a lot happening across the whole market that's dragging people out of their shells or away from their positions. And so when something's happening in the banks, we do see a lot of movement. Obviously, the big three of the big four have had their annual results, and CBA had that quarterly. And that has really shifted the prices around. So CBA was up at $106, $108. It's come right, well, actually hit 110. It's come right back. So it's in the low 90s now. We are still seeing a lot of buying, like 90% plus buying on that most days, which is very, very high for those guys. And we're also seeing a lot of buying in Westpac. So they were the two that were hit hardest. It's worth noting CBA is still, again, well up over 12 months. I mean, it was at $75 a year ago. So it's still an incredible position for a lot of holders to be in. They're up so much, but they're well off the highs. And so for a lot of our investors, if they didn't get in earlier, they're grabbing it now. For others, they've held it for a really long time. They're not going to pick it up at this price. Westpac, on the other hand, they're definitely picking up at this price. It's also a strong buy. ANZ's pretty mixed, and NAB, they're actually taking profits. A lot of people are moving out of NAB at the moment. It's held up as well as anyone could have hoped out of the big four during the recent period. And then we're seeing quite a bit of moving into the smaller ones. So Adelaide and Bendigo Bank and Bank of Queensland are getting quite a bit of attention. And what really surprised me, we saw some buying in Macquarie. Very unlike our guys to buy at the highs for something like Macquarie, but we're seeing it well above $200 and people buying it at that price. Not a lot of them, but a few picking it up.
Gemma, I understand Novanix has been on the list as well, seeing that price action this week.
This is really interesting to me. It's the value of the trades that are interesting. It's not so much that we're seeing right across the base, and we're not seeing a really strong trend in what they're doing. They're clearly trading it rather than buying consistently and holding it. But the value, 60% of those trades were over $100,000 in value. So very, very high value for our guys. So there's some high conviction trading going on. It's not buying and holding, they're moving in and out. And the one that surprised me most was obviously Harvey Norman getting hit really, really hard on disappointment. Our guys didn't touch it. So they don't see any opportunity there. Generally, a few of them will have a nibble at something that's been punished in the market. That was one they weren't willing to touch, despite it obviously being quite a retail name that they are familiar with.
Gemma, what are we seeing out of the US? Is that EV thematic still playing out?
I don't think we'll get away from that for quite a while. Tesla's still very much the most traded stock in terms of the number of individual trades. But the one that's come through really strongly, and this is very interesting, we see in our international trades this really strong theme of decarbonisation, renewable energy. Electric vehicles are kind of at the forefront of that, but they're quite sexy stocks. And so we see a lot of younger investors who want to buy something sexy buying their EVs. Our more mature investors are looking to renewable energy stocks and sort of more established companies, the ones that have consistent revenues, maybe some revenues in the case of some of the EVs. Enphase Energy is amazing to me. We are seeing this in there really strongly, and the values are massive, so very, very high values on an international basis where we see less trading than we do in Australia. So very, very high volumes of dollars going through that. We saw some heavy selling in it recently. It's up 48% over a month. So it's just performed incredibly strongly. For those who don't follow the stock, Enphase, you may know as the maker of microinverters for solar panels. So many Australians utilize the product. That is, it's very widely available in Australia and very widely used in Australia. They're on people's roofs, and it's been performing incredibly strongly. It's obviously a beneficiary of that trend, but it's a well-established company, and the product is very widely used. So it's one that our more mature investors are really comfortable putting some money into, and those who've been doing it have been making a fair amount out of it.
Gemma, always great to chat with you. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon from nabtrade.